Chinida Prasit unfolded a plastic dust sheet across the lobby floor and asked the woman to stand on it. The woman stood on it. Water came off her coat and off the ends of her hair and made a dark ring on the plastic around her shoes. Elza Kalnina was 34, a plus-size relief cleaner on the Foreign Agency roster, and she had left her flat at 6:30 that morning. "There are directors coming out of that lift in 4 minutes, Chinida said. "I would rather they did not have to walk round that." 2 men at the barrier looked at their phones. A woman on the low seats lifted her feet off the floor and kept them up. "Your interview was cancelled at 9, Chinida said. "We did ring. The number we hold is a landline. I have not had a landline for 2 years. "Then I am not sure what you want me to do about it." Elza did not answer that. She asked instead about the candidate booked for the 8:45 slot. The bridge road was under water at the pumping station. There was no way round it on foot. Chinida looked at her and said nothing. "How did you get here?" one of the men at the barrier asked. He did not ask it cruelly. "I walked." "From where?" "Kingsmere." The man did the arithmetic and his face did it for him. "That is 5 miles. "It is not far," Elza said. Then a man came across the lobby from the doors. He waited while she stepped off the sheet onto the marble. He picked the sheet up, folded it twice and held it out until Chinida took it from him. "Put that back in the cupboard," he said. "She is standing on my floor." At 7:20 that morning, Elza had walked past a stationary black car on the bridge road and had not looked into it. The man inside it had counted every minute she stayed in his mirror. She did not know his name yet. Nobody in that building said his name above a certain volume. The lobby went quiet in a particular way. The lift stopped where it was 4 floors up and stayed there. A phone rang behind the desk for a long time and nobody reached for it. Ferran Amat was 43. His grandfather had bought a yard and 2 lorries on the wrong side of the docks. His father had bought the rest of the street. The group now moved half the freight on the Eastern Corridor and every school bus in 3 boroughs. That was the part of the family business with a letterhead on it. "Turn the heaters on in here," he said to the man at the barrier. "All of them. Leave them on." The man went and turned them on. They stayed on for the rest of that winter and nobody ever gave the order to stop. "You are wet," Ferran said. "I am all right." "Is there somewhere I can put this down so it stops dripping on the floor?" She meant her coat. She had asked for a peg. That was the whole of what she had asked anybody for that morning. "Who cancelled the interview?" he asked. "Head office," Chinida said. "Which person?" It was a scheduling decision. "Who made the call to her?" "Reception did." He turned. The girl behind the desk had gone the color of the wall. "What time did you ring?" 9:20, sir. And she was told to leave a message. There was no answer. It just rang. "She was on the ferry bridge at 9:20, Ferran said. "In the rain, with no coat that could survive it." "Who decided the interview was cancelled?" Nobody spoke. The regional director, who had been due to come out of the lift in 4 minutes, did not come out of the lift at all. He was later heard to say that he had been advised to take the stairs, and he could not afterwards say who had advised him. The girl behind the desk spoke, because the silence became worse than answering. "It was cancelled yesterday, sir. At 4:30. I was told to ring in the morning." Not because she had suddenly found her courage, because standing there saying nothing had begun to feel more dangerous than saying it. "Thank you," Ferran said, and he meant it, and she started breathing again. He looked at Elza for a moment longer than the room was comfortable with. "The post is still open," he said. "Come upstairs. We will do it now." "No." The word landed flat in the middle of the lobby and stopped everything a second time. "No, not like this." She pushed the wet hair off her forehead with the back of her wrist. "If you take me upstairs in front of her in this coat, then in 6 months I will still be the woman who got a job because a man felt sorry for her in a lobby. I have had that job. It does not pay. Then what do you want? Put me on the agency roster. Same as everybody. Send me wherever there is a gap. If I am any good at it, you will hear about it from somebody who is not you." Chinida was still holding the folded dust sheet against her chest like a hymn book. "I apologize that the morning has been interrupted," Ferran said to the lobby. "Being fair to somebody is not an interruption. It is the work." He held the door for her himself. She thanked him for it the way she would have thanked anybody, and went out into the rain and walked to the replacement bus stop and waited 40 minutes for a service that had been advertised as running every 20. The Foreign Agency put her on the roving list, which is where they put the people they cannot place permanently. That meant a different building every day. Denmark Yard on Mondays, the school transport office at Priory Fields, on Tuesdays the workshop at Halverston on Thursdays, a training centre on the ring road when somebody was off, 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. 6 hours a locker she did not get to keep, and a signing-in book with her name spelled a different way at every site. Nobody learns your name in 6 hours. That was the arrangement. She was in 8 buildings a fortnight, and she was invisible in all of them, and the invisibility was not because anybody disliked her, it was because there was never any point in learning her. She liked the yards. She had spent her 20s in yards. She knew the smell of a diesel bus warming up at 6 in the morning the way other people know a kitchen. On her second Monday at Denmark Yard, she moved the notice board in the driver's room, 4 feet to the left. "Why did you do that?" Ferran asked. He was standing in the doorway with his coat over his arm. She did not stop mopping, because it was behind the door. You cannot read a rota that is behind a door. 2 of them have been reading it in the mirror. Who told you they were reading it in the mirror? Nobody. I watched them do it. He looked at the wall where the board had been, and at the wall where it was now. He said nothing else about it. The board stayed where she had put it for the next 4 years. The following week, her agency booking started at 10:15 instead of 10. Nobody told her why. It was the length of the walk from the replacement stop. Somebody had decided she should be paid for the part of the morning she spent standing in the rain. She never asked who. He never mentioned it. The drivers at Denmark Yard were tired in the way that men are tired when the roster has been wrong for 2 years. They queued at the tea urn at 9:30 and said very little. "That urn is the only thing in this yard that runs to time," Elza said, going past with a bucket. "That is because nobody has ever asked it to go anywhere." One of them laughed properly from the chest, and then looked surprised at himself. On the Thursday, a supervisor at Halverston was trying to fit a cover rota onto a whiteboard and could not make it work. 4 men off 2 vehicles down 3 schools. He had been at it since 7. Elza put the mop against the wall and looked at it for a while. "Move the Ashgrove run to the second driver and start it 9 minutes earlier," she said. "Then your 2 o'clock frees up, and you only need 1 man on overtime instead of 3. He stared at the board. Then he rubbed it out and did it, and it fitted. "How did you do that?" "You had it in the wrong order. Everybody does." She picked the mop up again. "Do not put my name on it. It is your board." He did not put her name on it. He told 4 people about it in the pub that Friday, though, and one of them was a fitter, and the fitter mentioned it to Ferran in the workshop the way you mention weather. Ferran asked the fitter that same afternoon how his week had been. It was the sort of question people ask in doorways without wanting the answer. The fitter told him. Then he stopped because Ferran had answered him back. Something about a fuel line and a coastal town he refused to drive to, and why. 6 sentences, maybe 7. "Run that past me again," the fitter said. "Why?" "No reason," the fitter said. He told his wife about it that night, and could not explain why it had unsettled him. They walked out to the gate together one afternoon, Elza and Ferran, because they happened to leave at the same time, and neither of them walked quickly. You never carry an umbrella. The wind comes up the bridge sideways. An umbrella is a thing you buy twice. There is a bus shelter halfway. There was. They took the seat out of it in April. Somebody decided the seat was attracting people. Attracting what? People, she said. That was the whole of the reason, as far as I could tell. He thought about that. I hate the coast. Everybody likes the coast. I have never once had a good day at the sea, he said. Not one. 43 years. That is a lot of consistency for a man to keep up. Chanida came out of the office block at the top of the yard and saw them, and stopped and then walked on as though she had been walking all along. I did not know the agency was sending you here, she said. They send me everywhere. How useful, Chanida said and went in. She went to the driver's room first before her own office and took the run sheets off the wall and put them in a drawer. Elza was still by the gate and did not see her do it. She did see the sheets the next Monday when she put them back up because they had been left on the side. The header on a run sheet is printed by the group, the same on every vehicle in 3 boroughs. Halfway down it said boarding allowance 4 minutes per wheelchair 6, where 2 are carried not to be reduced by the operator. Underneath it in the timetable for the 7:10, the leg from the Ashgrove estate to the school gate was given 9 minutes, and there were 2 chairs on it. She read it twice. Then she pinned it back on the board straight, and picked up her bucket, and said nothing to anybody, and went home on the replacement bus. Elza Kalnina was 13, and had a local history project due on the Friday which she had known about since October. The library had the newspaper archive on a machine that nobody had used since about the time Ieva was born. She was looking for the flood. What she found on the way to the flood was a photograph from 6 years earlier, on page 9, of 8 people in hard hats, standing at a new bus stop on the Kingsmere estate. Her mother was 4th from the left. Her mother was holding a rolled-up drawing and laughing at something outside the frame. The caption said, "Elza Kalnina, Principal Officer for Accessible Transport at the opening of the 241 corridor, which will serve 400 homes." Eva printed it for 20 pence and brought it home and put it on the table face up. "What is this?" Elza looked at it for a while. "That is the 241. That is you." "It was me. 6 years ago. You told me you had an office job." "I did have an office job." "You told me you did admin." Eva's voice went up. She was 13 and furious in the way that is really something else. "Everybody at school thinks you do cleaning." "I do cleaning." "That is not the point, and you know it is not the point." "No," Elza said. "It is not." She did not explain. She turned the printout face down on the table and asked whether the project needed anything else from the library, and Eva slammed a door and the flat was quiet after that. Eva put the photograph on the class blog on Wednesday because it was a good photograph and because she was still angry. Hodan Warsheim saw it on Thursday. She came round on Saturday morning, 31 years old, in a good coat, holding a bag of pastries she had bought on the way, because she did not know what else to bring. 8 years earlier, she had been Elza's graduate trainee and had been given the corridor drawings to check and had found 2 mistakes in them and been thanked in front of the whole team for it. She now held Elza's old post at the council. "I am not going to pretend I did not come here for a reason," Hodan said. "Nobody comes to Kingsmere by accident. Denmark Yard is on my desk. The complaints are going up and the school runs are late, and the incident book has entries in it I do not like." She put the bag down. "And I have been sitting there for 4 months feeling like a fraud in a chair that was yours. It is not my chair. I resigned." "You resigned because you would not sign the safety case for a network they had already cut. I was in the room. Then you know how much good it did." Hodan looked at the table. "I cannot use you," she said. "That is why I came. I have to say it to your face rather than not return a call because everybody in that building has been not returning your calls for 6 years. If a former officer with a tribunal against us goes anywhere near the depot paperwork, the operator's lawyer will have the whole review struck out in a morning. I would do it myself if I were them." "I know. Do you want me to say I am sorry?" "No," Elza said. "You would only be apologizing for being right." She saw Hodan out. Then she sat down at the table and turned the printout over and looked at the woman 4th from the left, and then she got up and put the pastries away because they were good ones, and Eva liked them, and because there was a shift on Monday. Ferran read the file at midnight alone in a room over the workshop that smelled of oil and paper. He had asked for nothing from anybody. Employment, tribunal judgments are published and the group's lawyers had access to the same database as everybody else, and it took 40 minutes. Kalnina against the borough. Withdrawn in part, dismissed in part, out of time. Costs of £2,200 awarded against the claimant. A paragraph noting that the claimant had appeared unrepresented and had funded the proceedings personally. Attached because a clerk had scanned the whole bundle in one go was a document she had written before any of it happened. Guidance on boarding allowances for wheelchair passengers on contracted school transport, adopted borough-wide. Author not named, because councils do not name authors. 4 minutes per chair. 6 where 2 are carried, not to be reduced by the operator. He read the sentence twice. He had seen it 1,000 times on the top of a run sheet and had never once wondered who had sat down and worked out that it took 4 minutes. He did not go and find her that night. He went the next afternoon at the gate in the rain because that was where she would be. "I read your tribunal judgment," he said. "That is public. You are allowed. I am telling you because I would rather you heard it from me than found out later." She pulled her hood up. "It is not much of a document. I lost. You were 3 days out of time. 9 days. She said it without heat. I filed 9 days late because my mother was in a hospice in Peterborough and I was driving up on Fridays. The clerk told me the date does not care why. They stood in it for a minute. I do not talk about it because there is nothing in it that helps anybody," she said. "The corridor got cut anyway. That is the end of the story. Everything after that is just me being cross in public. What happened to the house? She looked at him then. That is the bit nobody asks about, she said. Everybody asks about the job. I am asking about the house. We sold it. The tribunal cost more than I had. So we sold the house, and the only place I could get for what was left was Kingsmere, which is 5 miles out and served by 1 bus. Her mouth moved slightly, which I designed. Elza, do not, she said. Honestly. Do not. That is the joke, and I would rather it stayed a joke because the other version of it is not survivable. That was as much as she gave him that day, and he did not ask for more. He drove out through the gate, and the man on the barrier lifted it before the car reached it. At 4 the next morning, a gate on the far side of the docks was opened by a man who had not been told a name and did not ask for one, and a vehicle went in and came out again, and nothing was written down anywhere. A week later, a haulier who owned 40 lorries and a stretch of the North Quay moved his vehicles off the weighbridge and out of the way when the group's cars came down the ramp, and his son asked him why he had done it, and he stood there with his hands in his pockets and could not put it into a sentence. Not because the man owed the group money, because there are companies you can be owed money by and there are companies you make room for. The rumor came home from school in Eva's mouth on a Tuesday over beans on toast. Amber's mum says you got the depot because of a man in a car. Elza put her fork down. Say the rest of it. That is the rest of it. Eva. Her daughter's chin went. She said you got taken on because somebody in a car saw you and felt sorry for you, and that is why you get all the good sights, and that a woman like you does not walk 5 miles for an interview unless she is after something. A woman like me. That is what she said. Amber's mum works in the office at Priory Fields. Elza got up and filled the kettle and stood with her back to the room until the kettle was loud. She told Ferran on the Thursday only because he asked why she had changed her sights round, and she was too tired to make something up. He was quiet for a moment. Give me the name of the woman at Priory Fields. No. Elza. No. And listen to me before you do it anyway. She turned round. If you go down there and lean on somebody's mother, then by Friday it is true. Everything they are saying becomes true, and it becomes true forever. And my daughter hears the true version in the corridor at school. Leave it alone. It costs you something to leave it alone. It costs me nothing that I have not already paid, she said. Please. He left it alone. It was the first thing anybody had asked him not to do in 9 years, and he did as he was asked, and he did not enjoy it. It cost him in April. Janita Prasid put a written concern to head office about inappropriate access to the operational areas by an agency worker, and referred to comment among staff, and asked for the roster to be reviewed in the interest of a professional environment. He could not answer it. Every answer available to him required doing precisely the thing Elza had told him not to do. The Coron agency stopped booking Elza at Denmark Yard. They gave her the training center on the ring road instead, alone 6 until 9 in the evening, an empty building with the lights on timers. She did not complain. She took the shifts. £4.10 came out of her purse every Friday, and went across the counter to the man who ran the key-cutting stall at the market, who had lent her £240 2 winters ago, when the electricity went off on no terms at all, because he had known her mother. Ferran found out about it because he was standing behind her in the market queue and saw the money go over and the notebook come out and the figure go down. He had his wallet in his hand before he had decided anything. He put it back. The debt was down to £35. She had carried it for 2 years, £5 at a time, and she had never once been late, and if he cleared it on a Saturday morning, she would lose the only ledger in her whole life where she was ahead. He wanted to be the man in that notebook. That was the shape of it, and he knew exactly what it was called, and he did not much like himself for it. Eva saw the wallet. 13 sees everything. You were going to pay it. Yes. Don't, she said, and went to look at the phone cases. At 4:30 on a Wednesday morning, Elza was at the kitchen table writing an apology. It was to Chanida. It was the 6th version. The first had been 4 lines, and the 6th was 11, and it apologized for any discomfort caused, and for any misunderstanding regarding her presence in operational areas, and it asked whether she might be considered for the Monday shift, again, as she had found the yard a positive working environment. She read it back and stopped in the middle. Eva was in the doorway in her school jumper over her pajamas, wanting water. What is that? Nothing. There are 6 of them. Elza put the pen down and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was almost normal, which was worse. "I go first," she said. "That is what I have learned to do. Something happens to me, and I get in before anybody else. And I apologize for it, because if I apologize first, the shift does not get cancelled and we eat. I have been doing it for 6 years." She looked at the 6 pieces of paper. "And I did it to you on Sunday. You had not done anything, and I said sorry to you in my own kitchen, and I did not even hear myself do it." Eva did not say anything. She sat down at the table with her glass of water and stayed there. Elza tore the 6 sheets in half all together and dropped them in the bin. Then she got a bus timetable out of her bag, one of the paper ones, and turned it over, and wrote on the blank side in the small square capitals of somebody who has written in sight books all her life. The 7:10 from Ashgrove. 9 minutes booked. 2 chairs. 4 + 4. It cannot be done. It has never been done. She was on the 6:20 bus at 7 o'clock that morning, and she finished her shift, and she never mentioned that night to anybody, and she did not break again. She told him the second piece a week after that, standing at the Ring Road Training Center at 9:10, with the lights going off behind her on their timer. "I did not resign on principle," she said. "That is what Hodan thinks. I resigned because they gave me a network with the money taken out of it and asked me to sign that it was safe, and I sat there for 4 days working out whether I could. I could not make the sums work, and I have wondered ever since whether a better person would have stayed and made it less bad from the inside. What do you think now?" "I think a woman who stays and signs it is on the paper when it goes wrong," she said. "And I think I did it for my daughter, and I have never once told her that because she would have to carry it." He drove her home. Neither of them said anything for the last 2 miles, and neither of them turned the radio on. She asked him for 4 things on a Sunday night on the telephone in the voice of somebody reading a list. A vehicle with a working ramp, a driver, a stopwatch, the actual run sheet for the 7:10, the printed one, not a copy. 5:30, she said. "It has to be before the runs go out." "Why before?" "Because after is too late for the boy on the second chair." At 5:30 on the Tuesday morning, the yard at Denmark was cold and lit yellow and smelled of diesel and wet concrete. Ferran was there. Hodan Warsheim was there because he had rung the council at midnight and told them what he was about to do to himself. Chanida Prasit was there because she had been telephoned at 4 and told to come in. A fitter stood by the shutter with his arms folded. Nobody sat down. There was no table. "Show them the books," Ferran said. Elza put 3 walk-around books on the bonnet of the nearest minibus. Denmark Yard, Priory Fields, Halverston. "These are the daily checks." The driver signs to say he has walked round the vehicle and looked at the ramp and the straps. She opened all 3 at the 14th of January. Same morning, 3 sites 9 miles apart. The signatures were identical. Not similar. Identical down to the break in the loop of the second letter. "You cannot sign your name the same way twice," she said. "Nobody can." The fitter went into the office and came back with a rubber stamp in a plastic tray. It had been made 2 years earlier when a driver called Bautran had broken his wrist and could not hold a pen, and it had been meant to last a fortnight. Bautran was 56 and had come in on his day off because Elza had rung him. He looked at the stamp and went grey. "That is my name." "On 22 runs in October," Elza said. "You were in hospital for 9 days of it. Nobody ever told you your name was on them." "I have got the card," he said. He got his wallet out with both hands, and the appointment card was in it, soft at the folds, kept the way people keep things they have been frightened of. The 8th to the 17th. "Did you ever sign a blank sheet?" Ferran asked. The yard waited. A bird went over the shutter and everybody heard it. "Yes, sir," Bautran said. "For about a year. I signed the checks in a pile at the end of the week because there was no time in the morning. I knew what it was. I have known what it was every single day." "Thank you for saying so. It will take my license." "I know," Ferran said. "Say it anyway." The third thing was on a roll of paper. The fuel card printer in the corner of the office produced 2 copies of everything, and always had. The second copy wound onto a roll inside the machine, and the roll had not been changed for 2 years, because the machine was on a list to be decommissioned, and nobody decommissions anything. Elza had wound it out onto the floor of the driver's room at 2 in the morning on her hands and knees with a torch. "Vehicle 402, she said. "The 14th of January, fueled here at Denmark Yard at 7:40 in the morning. 26 liters." She looked up. Its run sheet has it on the Priory Fields School run at 7:40. That is 4.5 miles away, and there are 2 chairs on board. It could be an error, Chanida said. It is on the roll 91 times. Then Elza asked her question, and she asked it in the flat voice of somebody asking a colleague something technical, which is exactly what it was. Chanida, how long does it take to board a wheelchair passenger properly? Not on paper. On a wet morning on a curb with a powered chair. Chanida answered before she thought about it, because it was the one part of the job she had never been careless with in her life. 4 minutes. 6 with 2 chairs, if the second one is a powered chair, because you cannot clamp them in the same order. She lifted her chin slightly. And you do not rush it. I have told them 100 times you do not rush it. Thank you, Elza said. She took the run sheet for the 7:10 off the bonnet and held it up so the yard light came through it. Ashgrove Estate to the school gate. 9 minutes. 2 chairs. Nobody moved. Somewhere in the dark end of the yard an engine was idling, and it sounded very loud. Bring the ramp down, Elza said to the driver. Do it at your own speed. Do not do it for me. She reached over without looking, and turned Ferran's wrist towards her to read the second hand off his watch, still talking, and let go of it and carried on. Neither of them mentioned it then or afterwards. The ramp came down. The chair went up. The clamps went on 4 of them, and the belt across the chest and the driver's hands were quick and practiced and not hurried. 3 minutes 50. The second chair took 6 minutes 20, because the clamps went on in the wrong order and had to be redone. 10 minutes and 10 seconds, Elza said, for the boarding. Before the vehicle has moved 1 foot, and the leg is booked at 9. She put the sheet down on the bonnet. That run has been on that sheet for 2 years, which means for 2 years there have been only 3 ways to do it. You leave a child on the pavement. You are late every single day, and it is somebody else's problem when the school rings. Or you do not clamp the second chair properly, and you drive off. Hodan opened the incident book at the page she had marked with her thumb. The 9th of November, she read. Ashgrove Road. Chair moved in transit. No injury. Minor delay. The boy on that second chair was 9 years old and could not be strapped in by one person, which is why the 4-minute rule had been written in the first place by a woman who had timed it 40 times in a car park with a stopwatch and a borrowed chair, and had then been told there was no money for a passenger assistant. Ferran did not raise his voice. He had not raised it in the yard once. You did not take a bus route off a map, he said. You took it off 91 people who cannot drive to work, and then you put its 2 vehicles on the school run to cover the drivers you did not have, and you let a 9-year-old ride to school with the clamps guessed at, and one of the 91 walked 5 miles in the rain to be told she was making the floor wet. That was the whole of it, and he said it once, and the yard held it. Chanida Prasid did not cry, and did not deny it. I asked for 9 drivers, she said. 2 years. I have got every email. I did the sum you have just done in a car park in the winter on the back of a fuel receipt, and I sent it upstairs, and I was told to go away and do it again, until it came out differently. Her voice was quite steady. So I stopped sending sums and I started covering runs. Because the alternative was ringing 40 families on a Monday and telling them nobody is coming. I believe you, Ferran said. Then you know I am not the person you want. I know you are not the only one. He said it without any softening at all. I am going to use every email you have got, and I am going to use them properly, and the man who wrote back to you is going to answer for it in front of people who can take something off him. And you are still not going to be in this yard tomorrow. You stamped another man's name for 2 years and you never once put it in writing that you had been made to. If I had put it in writing, I would have been out in a week. Yes, he said. That is what it would have cost. That is what it always costs. He suspended the contract himself at 6 that morning. 31 vehicles came off the road for 9 days, and the group paid for every taxi and every escort out of its own account and did not bill the borough. He reported himself to the traffic commissioner before the borough could, which is not a thing that is done, and his lawyer told him twice that it was not a thing that is done. Then the yard emptied, and it was only the 2 of them and the lawyer. Before you ask me, Ferran said, the answer is no. I have not asked you anything. You will. Somebody always does on the 4th or 5th day when it gets slow. He was looking at the shutter. So I am telling you on a Tuesday, in front of a witness. So it is on the record that I said it first. Nobody's yard burns. Nobody has a bad night on the ring road. Nothing is handled. The lawyer waited. She has spent 6 years being told that her name is the reason nothing can be looked at, Ferran said. If I do it my way, then her name is the reason again, and she is that woman for the rest of her life, and she will never once know for certain that she won it herself. The lawyer wrote nothing down. There was nothing to write down. Hodan came to the flat that evening and asked the question she had come to ask. I need your name on the finding. You said you could not use me. I cannot use you as a witness who came to me. I can use you as an author who came forward and said so publicly with the tribunal in the first paragraph before their barrister gets to put it there. Hodan sat forward. They will take you apart with it, Elza. Every time. For years, Elza asked for a day. She came back the next evening and stood in Hodan's office and said it herself without being asked twice. In January, I told a man in a lobby that 5 miles is not far. I remember you telling me. It is far, Elza said. It is 5 miles and there are 91 people out at Kingsmere doing it in the dark, and one of them is 78. And there is a boy who cannot be strapped in by one person. She put the timetable with the small square capitals on the desk. Put my name on it. If they take me apart, they take me apart. If I stay quiet, she gets moved to another borough and does it again to somebody with less protection than I have got. And I have got a mafia boss and a mop, which is more than most. Hodan laughed once and then put her hand over her mouth. The finding was published on a Thursday. It arrived as a reference number, read out by a woman in an office, and nobody in the yard heard about it until the afternoon. The yards changed in a way that nobody announced. Men queued for the urn and talked. A supervisor at Halverston pinned the cover rota where you could read it without the mirror. Somebody put a seat back in the shelter at Ferry Bridge, and nobody ever found out who had authorized it. She was called up to the office over the workshop on a Friday and spent the whole walk deciding she was being cut loose. It made sense. The review was live and she was the awkward part of it. She had the sentence ready. The room was not what she expected. No pictures. A wall of timetables going back 30 years, most of them for services that no longer existed, and a map with pins in it and 2 chairs. I want you to run accessible operations for the group, Ferran said. Every school contract in 3 boroughs, and I want the boarding standard printed at the top of every run sheet we issue with the timings audited against it 4 times a year by you. No. He waited. Not yet, she said. Think about it properly. The review publishes in June. If I take a job from you in March, then in June a barrister stands up and asks me what I was paid, and every single thing I timed in that yard becomes a job application. The stamp goes away. The roll goes away. The boy goes away. She shook her head. I did not stand in that yard at 5:30, so it could be worth nothing in June. Ferran sat back. Something happened to his face that had not happened in the whole time she had known him. It took her a second to identify it as a smile. You are the only person who has ever turned me down twice. I am cheap and I am consistent. The review published on the 9th of June. It named the group and it named the borough, and it named a contracts director who had answered an operations manager 41 times in 2 years without once sending her a driver. On the 10th of June, Elza took the job. She took it for 18 months with the end date written into the contract in the 2nd clause before the salary. Nobody does that, the group's lawyer said. I did it once before, Elza said. I stayed somewhere past the point where I could afford to say no to anybody, and by the time I could say no, I had nothing left to say it with. It cost me the house. So it goes in the contract, and in 18 months I walk out of here on a Friday, and you look at me properly and ask me again. And if we do not ask, then it will have been 18 good months, she said, and I will still have my own coat on. She told Ferran the 3rd piece on the stairs going down. I never told Aiva what I used to be. Not one word for 6 years. She stopped on the landing. Not because I was ashamed of the cleaning, because if she knew, she would have been carrying it every day at school, and she is 13 and 13 is heavy enough. She knows now. She found it herself in a library, which is better. Elza started down again. She has told approximately the entire school. I have been informed that I am, and I am quoting sort of a big deal actually. 14 weeks later, the 241 came back. The first one left the Kingsmere terminus at 6:10 on a Monday morning in September, and there were 9 people on it, and one of them was 78 and had not been into town since April. There was no ribbon, and nobody made a speech. Elza was at the stop because she wanted to see the first one go, and because she wanted to check the shelter, had gone up straight. It had a seat in it. It had a timetable printed large enough to read in bad light. On the frame where the borough puts the technical notice that nobody ever reads, there was a line about boarding allowances 4 minutes per chair. 6, where 2 are carried not to be reduced by the operator. Her name was not on it. Councils do not name authors. She stood and looked at it in the dark and found that she did not mind at all. Then the school buses started going past on their way out to Ashgrove, and the first driver flashed his headlights at the shelter as he came by, and so did the second, and so did the one after that, and Bao Tran was on none of them, because he had lost his license in July, and was working the phones in the office at Priory Fields, and had asked to keep working. 9 of them flashed their lights at an empty bus shelter, with one woman standing in it over the course of about an hour, and no 2 of them had arranged it. Not because anybody had told them to, because in that yard that year, it had become the only decent way of saying a thing that none of them would have said out loud. Ferran was at the far end of the shelter with his hands in his pockets. He had walked down from the road. They will do that every morning for a fortnight, he said. Then they will stop and it will just be a bus. That is what I want. I want it to be just a bus. The last of them went past. It got light enough to see the rain coming in over the estate. Come and have dinner with me, Ferran said. Not a meeting. There is no folder. I have been standing in yards with you since January, and I have never once asked you for anything. She did not say yes. Saturday, she said. 7:30. It is the second door past the shelter. I know where you live. Then know this as well. She picked her bag up off the seat. Get the 241. It runs every 20 minutes now, and it stops at the end of my road, and if you turn up in that car, I will not open the door. On the Saturday, it rained the way it had rained in January. He got the 7:20 from the depot end and stood up twice, once for a woman with shopping and once for nobody in particular, and got off at Kingsmere with his coat already wet through, and walked the 200 yards to the second door past the shelter. She opened it before he knocked. She had been watching the stop. She stood in the doorway in her own clothes with the light behind her, and looked at him dripping on her step and put out her hand, and he took it, and neither of them was in any hurry to go inside. Some men move the world to make a woman fit it. He moved a bus route back onto a map and let her stay exactly as she was, and the city never knew which of the 2 of them had done it, and neither of them ever cared to correct anybody. Not because the work was secret, because the only thing either of them had ever wanted was for a woman standing in the rain at 6:10 to have somewhere dry to sit down. The shelter light is still on out there. It comes on at 5 over an empty seat and it waits.